Creative power is what moves the world, and Creative Conversations with Irene is a podcast series that offers insight and inspiration on how to thrive in the core essence of who you are as a woman. I'm your host, Irene Chong, and it thrills my heart to see more women awaken and come alive to your feminine intelligence. Listen in for soul and strategy to create your best life ever. Don't forget to subscribe or follow us on social media to receive updates on new episodes. Okay, so welcome, Susan. So Susan is a writer and a website writing coach. She's a former teacher as well, and I got to know her as part of a creativity group that we are in, where we dived into Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. And during our time together, well, Susan, we've had so many conversations around the importance of creativity and authentic self-expression. And that's why I'm really excited to have you on my podcast, because I feel that this is such an important topic for women. So I'd like to start by just welcoming you and also asking you, what role does creativity play in your life?
Hi, Irene. Thanks for having me on today. What role does creativity play in my life? There's a bit of push-pull with that, I think, because with this Artist's Way group that we're in together, I started that so that I would have a place to talk about self-expression and also to share it in community. I think creativity as a solopreneur, creativity and being a solopreneur, I really find these things to be the same, or entrepreneur, whatever the right word is. So in my journey for the last 4 years as an entrepreneur, I'm making it up as I go along. I'm learning things, but it's really sparked creativity in me. Because I need to figure out, what do I want to offer? And I think a lot of us at this time we're in what I would call personality-based businesses, where people are choosing to work with us because they like us, because they know us, we resonate somehow, we share values, or we have a similar way of looking at the world. And I think the way that we tap into that is through creative self-expression. So if I try to be somebody and try to build my business in a certain way because somebody else told me to do it, my own self-expression doesn't really come through in that. Is that making sense? It's like me building my business by following my own intuition and by trying to be playful and seeking joy in the offers I put out there or in the content that I put out there. That's how I see creativity playing a role in my business. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. And I love all these pieces they are bringing together, like that phrase, I'm making it up, that we are making it up as we go along. I really like that because there's that element of surprise, but also uncertainty. And I feel that that can be something that trips people up because with creativity, I find that it also involves taking risks, which is not something that a lot of people are comfortable with. I know that in my own background, it's the route that I was conditioned and taught to follow was you want to minimize risks. You want safety and security at all costs. And as you were sharing, I'm also reminded that the first few chapters of The Artist's Way that we had a discussion on was about being courageous enough to take risks. So I find it so interesting because like me, you're a former school teacher who decided to leave aside a stable, secure, and safe job in order to venture into something that is quite unknown. And because neither of us come from business backgrounds per se, we have had to make things up as we go along. And so you mentioned, trusting your intuition, making sure that you have fun, that there's joy as you go along. And I also know that we share a similar sentiment when it comes to educational philosophy, that it's not about rote learning, it's about experimentation, it's about play, learning through play. So I'd love to hear you say a bit more about how this has manifested in your life, especially in the 4 years that you have started your own business. How have you played in your business, and how has that enabled you to grow this business that you love?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it's something that I'm always chasing isn't the right word, but it's almost like I have to work at staying playful, because I am an adult and I am trying to make a business and I am trying to have my money or have my business bring in a profit. So there's like this very logical part of being an entrepreneur that can sometimes take over and overshadow the part of me that just wants to be playful. And so what I've really been learning over these past 4 years is to acknowledge that rational part of things and to use my thinking brain, but to lean into the playful aspects as well. And it reminds me a little bit of recess at the elementary school where I used to work, because some kids, especially little ones, kindergartners, and I worked a lot with kindergarten age kids, and I could just see their creativity kind of getting squashed down by the responsibility of being in school. And some of these kids took it really seriously, like, I'm in school now, so this is the expectation, and I have to do these things, otherwise I'm not being good. So there's like this sense of value that comes from responsibility. And I think like being able to put that aside, or have it be and responsible and playful. I think for me, that's what's finally starting to put my business in the right place for me, where I feel like it's so interesting, where I feel like it's more in balance. If I'm just logical and I just do the things that I have to do, and I like admin, if I just do admin and I just write all those emails and I just do all of the things that I need to do to make it look pretty in the back, I don't have any fun with that. So for me, that creative piece is really like, what am I putting out in the world? What am I sharing of myself? And maybe that's where the creativity comes. Like, when we're creative and playful, that's a pure thing. Like kids on the playground, they're just being themselves. You don't have to teach them how to play. You don't have to teach them how to do the games that they want to do. If it's free play, if you want them to play soccer, you have to teach them the rules of soccer. But if you want them just to play and be kids and be exuberant, then you need to give them the space to do that, and they will do it without you telling them to do it, right? And I think that's something that happens in education, where we're like, well, they're not playing right. It's like, just stand back and let them do what they want to do, right? Like, have that almost the observer of, what do the children want to do? And I think for me, the creative aspect in my business is, where am I leaning in if I'm not doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing? Where do I want to go with this? Like, what feels light in my business? And it's not, as I'm speaking of it, I'm really feeling like it's not that easy. It's not that easy to make space as an adult to play. But I think it is so essential for me as a person who wants to develop like my true self more in the world, that I have to just lean into, what does joy want to do? Like, what's fun for me? not what should I be doing. And maybe that's the artist date, right? Julia Cameron's artist dates of what's fun, like not what do you think you should do? I should take a class in watercolor, but like, what do you really want to do? Right? Like, do you want to go to the beach, or do you want to go and fly a kite, or what do you want to express where it's like just purely without judgment?
Mm.
Did I
Yeah.
answer your question, or did I go off on a massive tangent? I know we tend to like, our
No,
conversations
you're
are
absolutely on
so
track.
like broad.
I was going to bring up the artist date because when you mentioned play, I was reminded, and thank you for that reminder, because I know that sometimes in running my business and growing my business, I tend to get very caught up in the seriousness of all the responsibility and the obligation. And, when you were talking about the kids playing at recess, I had this visual in my mind that was very vivid of how sometimes the obligations and the duties and all the to-do lists and the tasks, it can
Mhm,
weigh me down. It feels like a stone or a brick that is tying me. There is anchoring in the structure, but sometimes when I overdo it and I forget about the lightness of play, as you were mentioning, I
mm,
immediately had this visual of balloons, of being buoyed up by the lightness of color and play, and just not really knowing what direction it will take me in. So I
mm.
feel that as adults, in some ways, play has been conditioned out of us. Earlier on, you
Yeah.
were mentioning all the rules that we've been taught when we are playing, right? So it's like, what do we do when we have creative, free expression? What are some of the ways in which we can play in an unrestricted way as adults? So that's where, I really thought about the artist dates. And I remember that in our little
Mm,
group, you had shared that it has been hard for you to take yourself on
mhm.
artist dates because of the seriousness, of the gravity with which you viewed having to complete an artist date. So let me just ask you, like in trying in your own life, right, personal life, trying to bring more creative expression into your life, what are some of the ways that have worked for you in bringing this more carefree, lighthearted play into your life?
Lots of therapy, Irene, lots of therapy. But I think, jokes aside, there is, I think in order to access that part of ourselves, we have to, again, take a risk because we don't know. We don't know where our creativity is going to lead us. And maybe we don't trust it. Maybe there's a lot of conditioning as adults. And I would say as women who tend traditionally to hold the bulk of the responsibility for certain things in families, often emotion, or, who tend to carry that more, we tend to have a lot of responsibilities for other people on us. And I don't think that's, I don't want to say that that's always how it is, but I think that it's often like that. And so what tends to happen with my creativity is that I take care of everybody else's needs first, and then I do my creativity. And that is not a perfect system, obviously, because depending on what everyone else's needs are, mine don't get met, or mine get met at the bottom of the list and incomplete, or, oh, I'll do that next week. And so what's been a challenge for me really is putting that at the way up closer to the top of the list of schedule that in first and make it a priority. Put my own oxygen mask on, my own creative essence, because it's almost like I get filled up with my own energy and can be a stronger person and a more grounded person when I allow space to express myself in different ways like that, because I really feel like it's like an energy signature. It's like really deeply core to who I am when I let myself play. when I let myself wander, when I let myself drive down a different road I haven't driven down before. It can be as simple as that.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned
Mm.
therapy as a joke, but I'm thinking that it's
Not a
actually
joke.
really, really important, because I'm thinking of all the
Mm-hmm.
wounds and the trauma that we have had around
Yeah,
expressing our creativity. You know, there is a period of
yeah,
recovery that needs to take place. And I
yeah.
know that for myself, I've had to heal that inner child that I've been told that she was too naughty, too playful, that she needs to grow up. So
Oh,
I'm thinking of
yeah,
all the coping
yeah.
mechanisms that I
Mm-hmm.
took on. And so in recovering my sense of creativity and playfulness and taking myself out on dates, I've had to work a lot with my inner child. So I love the fact that you
Yeah.
brought out this idea, this element of play and bring out what little kids naturally do. It's almost as if we are dropping away the conditioning to, for example, to care more for other people first before we take care of
Mm.
yourself. Whereas with
Yeah.
children, they don't see things that way. Like they just naturally, um, as just part of their own innate energy, express themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's a really important point.
Mm.
And when I think
Yeah.
of, you know, I didn't necessarily go into therapy. I know that what helped me was getting coaching, which is more forward looking. It's
Yeah.
oriented towards the future. But there were definitely
Yeah.
elements when I had to go back and look into my past. And one of the things
Yeah.
that really helped me was writing or journaling,
Mm.
what in some circles they call narrative therapy. So I know
Okay.
that, you know, a lot of the work that you do is to help women in their businesses express themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
before they can even
Mm-hmm.
express themselves in their work and express themselves authentically and genuinely, you know, they have to work
Yeah.
on their personal self-expression as well. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
interested in the ways in which you make space. That was also something that you talked a lot about, how important it is to create space, to make space for yourself and for the women that you work with, to ensure that they get to explore their own creativity in a playful, in a safe space, so that they can arrive at genuine self-expression. Can
Mm.
you share some of the ways in which, or some of the tips and strategies in which you use yourself, or the ways in which you help your clients come into a fuller self-expression?
Absolutely. And just before I do that, I want to be clear that I don't think therapy is a joke whatsoever. Um, it's more being aware of how much therapy, either from others or therapy from doing art, or from being creative, how much that is therapeutic. So I think therapy is really important sometimes, and that inner child work as well. Can I show you a picture?
Oh,
I don't know if
yes,
it's going to
please.
come through, but I really want to. I found something this week that is very much how I feel about caring for that inner child, caring for that creative child. Just, it's on my wall. One sec. I want to show it to you. So what I really love about this image is the way I see this first as mother and child, but what I also experienced this as was inner child and future self. And I love the way that the larger character in this image is holding the spotlight on the inner child and letting that inner child have the attention put on them. I find this a really supportive image. And I love this idea that wherever my soul is going in the future, I need to take my inner child by the hand. And I see that as my creativity.
That is so
Yeah.
beautiful, Susan. Thank you for sharing that visual with us.
Mm.
Oh, it's beautiful. Was it a painting that you did or that you purchased?
No, no, no. It's an artist. I pulled it out of a calendar.
Ah.
Um, I'm not sure who this artist is. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I've seen different images that this person has done before. Their style is quite distinctive, but I think what I really loved about it was how, if that is me and my inner child, how by shining a light on the inner child and supporting that part of me, supporting that creative part of me, that's when I can flourish. I think that's when I can really su feel supported as a person. Like, often I think in our family of origin, we want our maybe we want the ideal mother to do that for us, and it's not always possible. We don't always get that kind of a relationship, but it doesn't mean that part of the healing process can't be us shining the light on our own inner child, because we know how to do it best. We're the ones that really know what is our need. What is our inner need? Maybe our mother had her own issues or her own background or her own life journey, and she couldn't shine the light on us like we really wanted her to. But we can do that because we know what it feels like to really shine. And I think we do that through our creativity. I didn't answer your question at all. I went on a total sidetrack, but I just really felt inspired to speak to that piece on the inner child.
Well, actually, I think you
Yeah.
did answer my question because, you know, I was also thinking of how there is nothing more powerful than a visual to give us that representation of what it means to play. Because when I look at the image, it was so creative of how that light, you know, it was there's this beautiful wire. It's not realistic per se because it's a creative representation of what it means to walk hand in hand. And I love your interpretation of it as, you know, the adult you holding, you know, walking step by step with your inner child. And this time round, you know, putting the spotlight on her. I know that we've had so many conversations around mother-daughter issues as well, and how that can the lack of nurturing or the neglect can cause us to stunt our own creative process. But with this, you know, like it's almost like there's this acknowledgement that your inner child deserves to shine. She deserves to have the spotlight on her, and that as you're walking, as you're taking that journey with her, you're going to be with her each step of the way, and you're going to be the one holding that guiding light for her as well. And I love the fact that you use the word flourish, because that's exactly what I saw when I looked at the image, you know, the color, the reds, and there are all these vibrant flower motifs as well. It just reminded me of how, as women, when we really thrive and flourish in our feminine intelligence, it's almost like as creatrixes, you know, some of the audience who's watching this may be mothers, but if not, you know, if they're not biological mothers, we still carry the energy of the mother archetype within us. And what I found for myself as I matured into an adult was that I had to learn how to be the mother for my inner child, the mother that my own biological mother was not able to be for reasons of her own. And, you know, when I think about creativity, I'm also thinking of this phrase that said, it's not about how many resources you have, it's about how resourceful you are. So I associate being resourceful with being creative. Because I know that sometimes it can feel like a challenge, like, oh, how am I going to be able to bring more creativity to my life? I don't have the time, I don't have the resources, I don't have, you know, like we come up with all these excuses that are camouflaged, that are disguised as reasons. But at the end of the day, I personally feel, and from your sharing, I get that you know this as well, that a lot of the time it's about having that motivation, having that inspiration inside of you to want to take this step on your creative journey. And once you ignite that spark inside of yourself, the spark that every inner child inside of us has, then it's just about finding ways and opportunities in which it can flourish. And so you hadn't given any specific examples, which is the question that I asked. But in the example that you gave, it's almost like, oh, okay, you found inspiration in a painting from a calendar. You know, that sparked inspiration in you. So why don't you just give us a concrete example in which you have shone the light on your inner child in daily life?
I think it's in letting myself call myself a writer, because for a long time I've been an aspiring writer, right? So I've been hoping that I'm a writer, or I've been thinking about writing, or all of that. And this is very much a process, but by sort of claiming the term, it's almost like allowing myself to believe in magic, allowing myself to believe that I can be anything that I want to be, which is a very childlike place to be, right? It's that seed of potential, in a sense, right? There's innocence there, but also this hopefulness and this exuberance for the future. And I think that for me to allow myself to feel that and to stoke it and to call myself a writer, I don't know where my writing is going to go. I love writing. I've always written. I have boxes and boxes and boxes of journal writing that I've done that is just me pouring it out onto the page, right? And that is a thing that is sacred in my life, that I write every day. I do. And if I'm sick, okay, I don't do it, but every day something gets written down. But it's to allow myself to claim the title, in a sense. I don't know, there's a lot of hopefulness in there. There's some nurturing there, and some space of potential in claiming that as, no, I am a writer. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but that doesn't matter. I want it. I want to embody it. And there's something there. This is kind of recent for me, so I don't have the full-fledged idea, but allowing myself to do that is really letting the light shine. Is putting the light on the inner child and saying, okay, try it out. See what happens, right? It's not a guaranteed thing that I'm going to be a best-selling author, or I'm going to make money writing, or any of that. But it's like, that's allowing that expression to come through and to follow it, to trust it. I think that's what I would answer. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you've created a sacred ritual for yourself that feeds and nourishes you. And I love the idea of like, oh, there is magic in claiming an identity for yourself. Because it is an identity shift, right? Shifting that perspective from aspiring writer to writer. And I think of all the, make-believe roles that when we were kids, when we were children, we easily put on these hats. And then as we grew older, we started to say, oh, no, that's not me. So it's like giving yourself permission to claim an identity that you want. And I feel that, in that final share of yours, we sort of came full circle around the idea of experimentation, playing, exploring, coming back to that image that you shared with our audience. I'm thinking of how the child, the little girl, has the spotlight on her, and how that can be a frightening thing, because so many of us, I know myself included, we're afraid of being seen, of being visible, of having the light on us. But what I loved about the image was, even though she had the light on her, she was not alone. She had her hand safely held in her adult self, who was looking out at her. And it's almost like, there is a risk in being seen. But so long as we know that somebody has got our back, and that somebody is essentially ourselves, as well as a community of like-minded, heart-centered souls that we can rely on and count on, as we have in our creative group here. But, like once we have that, we know that we're not alone. And that makes the whole creative journey so much more, I don't know if the word is manageable, but it just makes it so much lighter. There isn't that seriousness and gravity and heaviness that comes from taking risks.
Yeah. Well, and I think risk taking can often be that the risk is a loss of belonging. If I do this creative thing, if I call myself an artist, well, maybe my family's going to reject me, or maybe I'm not going to make any money, or maybe my friends aren't going to like me anymore. And I think Julia Cameron talks about this as well, that sometimes we don't take that first step into a more artistic life because it's a risk. We're scared of what we're going to lose. But to bring it back to that image of sort of like holding my own hand in that and allowing myself to have my hand held, allowing myself to be supported, because I think what comes from the idea of not belonging is that we become fiercely independent. We become, I can do it all on my own. I don't need anybody because I've been rejected because of who I am. So I don't need to be with anybody. I can do this. Leave me alone. But I think we lose something in that. We lose connection with belonging. And so for me to bring it back to that image that's just jumped out at me the other day, it was, that sometimes the belonging starts with, I belong to myself. I belong to what my soul is here to do. And there are always external belongings that happen. But if we reject ourselves, well, where do you go from there? I think it's a really deeper thing. And so for me to have my future self or holding on to my inner child, it's about belonging to myself. It's about accepting myself for this is the journey I'm on. And that's a journey of a lifetime. I don't take that lightly at all. But I think there is some level of self-acceptance that comes through being creative. By expressing myself, by allowing myself to play. I have to accept myself for myself and not judge what I create.
Yeah, beautiful. And you're really speaking the language of my heart, Susan. Because what I teach in the principles of space, and space is an acronym. S stands for self-love, C stands for creativity. But in order to come into full creative self-expression, self-love is fundamental. You've got to accept these parts of you. You've got to belong to yourself first and foremost. So that was such a beautiful reminder. I feel that in you highlighting the need to receive support, that's also a very feminine quality, receptivity, feeling that you are worthy and deserving of receiving support in the form of community and connection, to help bolster that relationship that you have with yourself as well. It all sort of goes hand in hand. I think that's a beautiful note to end our conversation on. There's so much more that I wish we had time for. It sounds like we're going to have to do a part 2 here, but I think there have been so many rich gems and takeaways from our conversation today that I really hope that the audience who's watching this will be inspired to kickstart their own creative journey, to shine the light on themselves finally, and take up space to come into fuller, more genuine, more authentic self-expression. So thank you so much,
Beautiful.
Susan, for sharing with us your
pleasure.
personal journey.
Thank you, Irene. It's been a real pleasure. You've made my day.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and that you'll be taking away nourishing gems to create a more joyful and fulfilling life, because that's what it's all about. If you liked what you heard, do give a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. And I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and let me know your takeaways and reflections. Till next time, remember to light up the world with your beauty and creativity.